The ache starts between your shoulder blades in minute 40. Not a sharp pain. Nothing you could complain about out loud. Just a slow, blooming pressure, like a thumb pushing into the muscle beside your spine, growing heavier with every breath you're not allowed to take too deeply. Your chin is lifted at an angle somebody else chose for you. Your left hand rests on a velvet cushion, in a position that felt natural for the first 90 seconds, and has felt like a stranger's hand ever since. Somewhere behind the easel, a man you barely know is staring at your mouth with an intensity no one has ever directed at your mouth before, and you cannot move. There is an itch on your cheekbone. It arrived 20 minutes ago, small as a fly's footstep. It is now the largest single fact in your universe. You cannot scratch it. You cannot roll your shoulders. You cannot even swallow properly, because the painter has just lifted his eyes from the canvas to your throat, and whatever your throat is doing right now is being recorded for eternity. Hold still. That, right there, that ache, that itch, that trapped, screaming stillness under a calm face, is what tonight's story is made of. Because for about 400 years before the camera came and shortened the sentence, this was the price of having a face that outlived you. Picture the most famous portraits ever painted. Kings in armour, queens in pearls the size of grapes, merchants' wives with their little dogs, society beauties in black satin. Every single one of those serene, timeless faces was bought with hours, sometimes dozens of hours, of enforced, aching, humiliating stillness. Necks propped, arms cramping, bladders ignored, smiles abandoned after the first quarter hour because no human being can hold a smile for 40 minutes without it curdling into something frightening. And behind every one of those faces a quiet war. Between the person in the chair, who wanted to look like their best imagined self, and the person behind the easel, who was looking, really looking, at what was actually there. Sometimes the sitter won that war. Sometimes the painter won. And once in Paris in the spring of 1884, the war went so publicly, so catastrophically wrong, that it destroyed a woman's reputation in a single afternoon, and drove one of the greatest painters who ever lived out of the country. We're going there tonight. All of it. The goldsmith's upstairs room in Tudor London, where a young man sits sweating under a north-facing window. The silk-stuffed studio machine on the Thames where an entire aristocracy queued up, by the hour, to buy faces better than their own. The Georgian portrait factory where a deaf painter ran 6 sitters a day past his easel like a coaching timetable. The little painted rectangle 2 inches tall that got shipped across the sea to decide a royal marriage, and the famous disaster that every sitter afterward knew by heart. The American farm parlour with its smell of wood smoke and linseed oil, and then Paris, and the fallen shoulder strap, and the crowd laughing under the glass roof of the salon. One thing before we start, because I want to be straight with you about how tonight works. The painters in this story are real. The studios, the prices, the appointment books, the treatises, the scandals, the dates, all documented, and where the record runs out, I'll say so out loud. But the eyes I'm going to lend you, the body in the sitter's chair, the young gentleman, the merchant's daughter, the farmer's wife, those are borrowed eyes, stitched together from 100 sitters, who really did sit in exactly those rooms, under exactly those rules. They stand for the crowd of the forgotten. When I name a real person in the chair, and I will more than once, every detail of their sitting is on record. I will always tell you which is which. So, I make these history stories, and at this point I've honestly stopped trying to figure out whether you actually sleep to them, or whether you're just a room full of weirdos who find something soothing about neck cramps, lead-based face powder, and a Paris crowd mocking a woman's bare shoulder. I've decided not to ask. Subscribe if you feel like it. Shift around, find the good position, let your shoulders drop. You're allowed to move. That's the one luxury nobody in tonight's story gets. Here we go. It is a Tuesday morning in June, 1587, and you're climbing a narrow wooden staircase off Gutter Lane, a few steps from the roar of Cheapside in the city of London. You are 24 years old, a gentleman's second son with a new starched ruff, and exactly enough money for what you're about to do, and the staircase smells of three things at once. Linseed oil, sweetish and heavy, like a carpenter's shop crossed with a kitchen. Gum arabic dissolving somewhere in a dish, faintly like old honey. And under both of those the clean mineral ghost of ground pigment, crushed stone, crushed shell, things dug out of the earth and pounded into powder fine enough to become somebody's face. Your heart is going faster than the stairs deserve, because the man at the top of these stairs is Nicholas Hilliard, goldsmith, jeweller, and limner to the Queen herself, and you have paid. You try not to think about how much you have paid for him to make your face small enough to hold in a woman's hand. That's what a portrait miniature is, not a painting on a wall, a painting you can close your fist around. 2 inches tall, sometimes less, painted in watercolour on a scrap of vellum, fine calf skin, shaved and smoothed, which has been pasted onto an ordinary playing card to stiffen it. Turn over some of the most precious little portraits of this age, and you'll find the Ace of Hearts staring back at you. The Queen's own face, backed by a tavern card. Nobody in 1587 finds this strange. You find the room at the top flooded with a light unlike any light you've ever stood in. One large window, facing north and a little east, so the sun never enters directly. No fire lit, though it's June and the room is cool. No shadows anywhere. Just an even, pale, merciless clarity that fills every corner and falls on a small table by the window where brushes stand in a jar, points upward, fine as whiskers. And when I say fine, I need you to understand what that means. These are not brushes as you'd imagine them. These are pencils, as limners call them. Squirrel hair, gathered and bound into points so small that some of them lay down a line thinner than hair on your head. With brushes like these, a man can paint each curl of your beard, individually. Hilliard himself turns from the window. He is about 40, neat as a communion cup, and this is the first strange thing you notice. He is dressed in silk, not workshop clothes, not an apron crusted with paint like the sign painters down by the river. Silk, fine and quiet-coloured, as if he were the gentleman and you were the tradesman. Years later, near the end of the century, Hilliard will sit down and write all of this out. A treatise on the art of limning, the first of its kind in English, and in it he will explain exactly why. Limning, he writes, is a thing apart from all other painting. It is for gentlemen. It must be done sweetly and cleanly. The limner must be precise in his apparel, because the enemy of a painting 2 inches tall is not bad drawing. It is dust. It is dandruff. It is one flake from a woolen sleeve, one speck drifting down onto a wet face the size of a thumbnail, where a single grain of grit sits like a boulder on a cheek. He warns against it in writing. Guard the work from dust, from the dandruff of the head, from spittle when you speak. His workroom is clean the way a chapel is clean, so that is the first rule of this room, and he tells it to you plainly, with a courtesy that does not feel optional. You will sit where he places you. You will keep your hands still, and you will not lean in to look. The chair is set close to the window, closer than you expected. Close enough that when Hilliard draws up his own stool, your knees are nearly touching his table, and his eyes, when they lift to your face, are perhaps 4 feet from yours. You have never in your life been looked at from 4 feet away by a man whose entire profession is looking. He begins with nothing you can see, a gaze, a long one, then the faintest whisper of a line. He works up the face first, a pale carnation ground already laid on the vellum, the features found with a fine point in a colour so faint you doubt it's there at all. And now comes the part nobody warned you about. Nothing happens. I mean that from where you sit, nothing happens for a very long time. The bells of St. Paul's, big and slow, and the parish bells around it, mark the quarter hours, and the quarters crawl. There is the whisper of the pencil, softer than a mouse in a wall. There is the tiny click of the brush against the shell of pigment. There is Hilliard's breathing, calm as sleep. And there is you, chin lifted, eyes fixed on the corner of a shelf, holding your own face like a brimming cup you're forbidden to spill. The ruff was a mistake. You understand this by the second quarter hour. The starch stands it stiff as a platter around your jaw, which looked magnificent in your lodging this morning, and now means that your neck can rest nowhere and touch nothing. Sweat gathers where linen meets skin. The pin at your left shoulder, one of the dozen pins holding your whole fashionable shell together, because in 1587 clothes are not so much worn as assembled onto the body. That pin has worked a fraction loose, and its point rests against you like a small cold tooth. You cannot reach it. You cannot even acknowledge it. A gentleman does not squirm. Remember that pin. Tonight's story is full of pins, laces, straps, all the rigging that holds a sitter's glory together. Keep an eye on what happens when the rigging slips. The ache arrives on schedule, minute 40, between the shoulder blades, the same ache you brought into this story, and blooms outward like ink in water. But here is the second strange thing, the thing that separates Hilliard's room from an ordinary ordeal. He talks to you, quietly, easily. He asks about your family, your studies at the Inns of Court, the lady. He's far too courteous to ask outright who the miniature is for, and far too experienced not to know. And he watches you while you answer. Not your words, your face. Because this, he will write in that treatise, is the whole secret of his art. A face is not a fixed thing. It is a weather system, and the limner lies in wait for the good weather, for what he calls the lovely graces, the witty smilings, the stolen glances that suddenly like lightning pass and are gone. He cannot ask you to produce them. Asked for smiles are corpses. Every portrait painter for the next 4 centuries will learn that same lesson. So instead he makes the weather himself, a question, a dry little joke, a pause that invites you to fill it. And when something true crosses your face, 1 second, maybe 2, the pencil moves. You're being hunted is what I'm telling you. Pleasantly, expertly hunted, in a clean room smelling of honey and stone, by a man in silk who is stealing lightning off your face. An hour in, he grants you relief. Stand, stretch, walk to the far end of the room. You nearly stagger. Your knee has gone to wooden sleep. Your neck cracks like a green branch. And of course, the moment you're released, you do the forbidden thing with your eyes. You look toward the table, toward the little vellum oval, hungry for yourself. He covers it with his hand, not sharply, the way you'd shield a candle. Not yet, he says. A face half finished is a slander. You'll see it when it's true. And this too hold on to, this hunger and this refusal. Every sitter in tonight's story wants the same two things at once, to be seen and to control what is seen. And in this room you have exactly none of that control. The result will be shown to you when it is finished, and it will then exist permanently whether you love it or not. It will be you forever, as decided by somebody else. There are people lying awake in 1587 over exactly this fear, and before the night is out you'll watch that fear come true for one of them in front of all of Paris. 3 sittings it takes across 2 weeks. Perhaps 6 hours of your life in that chair for a face 2 inches tall. And in fairness, the 6th hour is easier than the first. Your body learns stillness the way it learns rowing. You find the trick every sitter across 400 years will find. You go somewhere else. You stop fighting the itch and float just behind your own face, letting it stand empty at the window like a house with the master away. There is, though you'd never say the word out loud, something almost like sleep in it. Eyes open, body abandoned. The whisper of squirrel hair, filling in your beard 1 curl at a time. Hold still. It's easier now. That's a strange gift hiding inside the torture, and we'll come back to it before morning. When he finally turns the little oval toward you, your first feeling is not vanity. It is vertigo. There you are. Truly you. The lightning caught. An expression you recognize but have never once seen. Because no mirror has ever shown you your own face listening. It is the size of a large coin, and it is more alive than the mirror. You will pay him more than a working man earns in a season, and walking down the gutter lane stairs you will feel absurdly that it was cheap. Now, before you leave this room, understand who else has sat in this kind of chair, because the most powerful person in England has done exactly what you just did, and she did it as a matter of state. 15 years earlier, in 1572, Nicholas Hilliard was granted his first sitting with Queen Elizabeth herself, and we know how it went, because he wrote it down. They spoke about shadows. Why, the Queen wanted to know, did some painters model a face with heavy shadow, while the Italians, best reputed for their faces, used little or none? Hilliard answered that shadow belongs to ill-placed light, that a clear beauty needs none of it. And Elizabeth, having heard him out, chose her own arrangements. She sat for him in the open alley of a goodly garden, where no tree was near, nor any shadow at all. Full daylight, nothing hidden, nothing modelled, nothing left to a painter's discretionary darkness. Read that scene again, the way a sitter would. The Queen of England did not simply sit for her portrait. She negotiated the optics before the first line was drawn. She understood, better than any monarch of her age, that the war between sitter and painter is a war about power, and she had no intention of losing it to a shadow, and she never stopped fighting it. As early as 1563, her chief minister William Cecil drafted a proclamation to control who might make the Queen's image at all. Every portrait to follow an approved pattern. That draft, as far as the record shows, was never formally issued. I'll be straight with you where the paper trail thins, but the intent behind it hardened into practice for the rest of the reign. Faces of the Queen were produced from approved patterns, copied and recopied in workshops across London. And by the 1590s, with the real Elizabeth past 60, teeth failing, the famous Red Era wig, the skin beneath the cirrus a map of years, the approved face parted company with the living one entirely. Art historians now call that final pattern the mask of youth, a smooth, ageless, radiant face, issued from Hilliard's workshop and repeated on miniature after miniature, jewel after jewel, while the woman herself grew old inside the palace like anyone else. The portrait no longer recorded the Queen, it replaced her, and in 1596 came the sharpest documented stroke of the whole campaign. The Privy Council ordered a search for portraits of the Queen that caused her, the phrase in the record is worth the pause, great offence. Unseemly likenesses, painted by unskilful hands, showing her, one presumes, as she actually looked. Officers were to assist the Queen's own sergeant painter in seeking them out. Such pictures were to be defaced, destroyed, burned or broken, an image purge conducted by the state against paintings for the crime of resemblance. So hold both halves of this in your hands as you leave Tudor London. In the chair, a young man with a slipping pin and a cramp, powerless over his own painted face. On the throne, the one sitter in the kingdom with the power every sitter secretly wants, the power to hunt down the unflattering likeness and put it to death. Everyone in the chair, for the next 300 years, is strung somewhere between those two poles. Almost all of them are nearer yours, down the stairs, out into the bellow and dung smell of Cheapside. The little oval rides warm in your breast pocket, your own stolen lightning, and the pin at your shoulder has drawn, you discover, one bright bead of blood. You never do find out what she thought of it. History keeps the miniatures and loses the answers. Now walk forward 50 years and change everything about yourself except the ache. It is a Thursday in October, 1638, and you are a knight's wife of 31, stepping out of a wherry onto a private landing stage on the north bank of the Thames at Blackfriars, London. The river behind you smells of tar, fish and tide mud. The air ahead smells of coal smoke and faintly of oranges, because the house you are about to enter is scented like a nobleman's house, and that is the first thing everyone says about it. The second thing everyone says is that the king himself lands at this same jetty. That is not a rumour. The Crown paid to build a causeway here for exactly that purpose, so that Charles I, King of England, can be rowed downriver from Whitehall and step ashore, privately, at the door of a painter. Stop on the landing stage for one breath and understand how upside down that is. Kings do not go to tradesmen. Tradesmen are summoned. But the man in this house is Sir Anthony van Dyck, knighted within months of arriving from Antwerp in 1632, granted a pension of £200 a year, and titled, in the official grant, Principal Painter in Ordinary to their Majesties. He has painted the king on horseback the size of a wall, the queen in more poses than her own mirror knows, and by now nearly every face in England worth a title. And so the world has quietly rearranged itself around his easel. The king comes to Blackfriars, and today, so do you. Here is what your visit has already cost before you've climbed his stair. Your husband agreed a price weeks ago. For a full length, with hands in your best silk, the figure being discussed is on the order of £50 or £60. Sit with that number a moment. Your chambermaid, the girl who laced you into your bodice at dawn, earns perhaps £2 a year and her keep. The painting will cost more than she will earn between now and the year 1665. It is, your husband keeps saying, an investment. What he means, though he doesn't have the words for it, is that this portrait will outlive both of you, and that whoever your great-grandchildren imagine when they hear your name will be whatever leaves this studio on canvas. You're not buying a picture. You are buying the version of you that gets to be permanent. Up the stair, then, and the first shock of the studio is that it runs on the clock. You are told your hour, not your day, your hour, and the accounts of this studio written down by men who sat here describe a system so unlike Hilliard's hushed chapel that it belongs to a different universe. Van Dyck gives each sitter an appointed day and an appointed hour. He works on you for that hour, and when the clock strikes, he stands, makes you a bow. Polished, unhurried, absolutely final, and that is that. Another appointment is fixed, another day. Before your rustle of silk is out of one door, a servant is cleaning his brushes and setting out a fresh palette, and the next sitter is coming in by the other. Sitter after sitter, hour after hour, day upon day. The most fashionable faces in the kingdom filed through one room like the tide through an arch. People call it many things, a court in miniature, a mill for faces. Nobody calls it what it most resembles, because the thing it most resembles hasn't been invented yet. An appointment book with an easel in the middle. The room itself is warm, high-windowed, and full of quiet motion. Assistants, young men from the Low Countries mostly, move along the walls, where canvases in every state of undress lean in ranks. A general who is all face and blank chest, a countess complete but for her hands, a grey ghost of an archbishop drawn in dead colour waiting for life. A boy grinds pigment in a corner. The stone mutters, the smell of walnut oil and lead-white rides over the orange-scented air. Somewhere below, a lutenist is playing, because Van Dyck keeps his sitters entertained, keeps a fine table, receives you not as a client but as a guest. It is all exquisitely comfortable. It is also, you begin to notice, a machine, and you are the material in it. The great man himself is smaller than you expected, tired around the eyes. He's not yet 40 and has perhaps 3 years to live, though nobody in the room knows that. And he is charm itself for precisely as long as charm is efficient. He seats you on a low dais. He studies you for a long moment with the same weighing look Hilliard used, the look that has nothing to do with courtesy. Then he takes up a small sheet and, in a quarter of an hour, sketches the pose. You, tilted just so, one hand at your breast, the other trailing, and passes the drawing without a word to an assistant. And then comes your first humiliation, delivered so smoothly you almost miss it. The gown you are wearing, the good blue silk chosen over 2 weeks, the subject of letters between your husband and your mother, is examined gently and found wanting, not in quality, in paintability. The blue takes the light poorly, murmurs the great man. The sleeves are 2 seasons old and will date the picture before the varnish dries. From a press at the side of the room, an assistant brings out shimmering armfuls of the studio's own silks, loose, timeless, amber and silver draperies that belong to no fashion and no decade. Half the great ladies of England, you will realise later, walking the galleries of other people's houses, are wearing these same studio silks in their portraits, the same amber satin, from the same press in this same room, on a dozen different bodies. Your descendants will believe you dressed like a goddess. You dressed like a goddess for 1 hour, in borrowed clothes, in a painter's warehouse. You change behind a screen, with your maid and one of the studio women pinning the drapery to fit. Pins again. The rigging of glory. One of them, at your right shoulder, holding the borrowed satin against gravity, is set slightly proud of the fold, and you will feel its small cold presence for the rest of the sitting. The second slipping pin of tonight's story. Keep counting. Then the hour, and the hour's work. The pose looked like nothing when he sketched it. Standing, weight easy, one hand resting at the collarbone, face turned toward the window, 4 minutes in, your raised elbow weighs 9 pounds. 9 minutes in, it weighs 40. The trailing hand wants to close. You can feel your fingers curling on their own, like a plant's slow treachery, and you must keep them open, soft, weightless looking, while the arm above them burns. The turn of your neck, so casual, so elegant, presses a slow crease of fire along one side of your spine until it finds, of course, that same place between the shoulder blades. Minute 40. The ache blooms. Old friend by now. He talks less than Hilliard. He works with a speed that is its own kind of unnerving. No hesitation, no reconsidering. The brush moving from your face to the canvas and back like a shuttle. What he wants from you is not conversation. It is presence. Whenever your attention drifts and your face goes to sleep, he says, without looking up, a single word, "Madam," and you surface again, and whatever surfaces with you goes onto the canvas. The clock strikes. He rises. The bow. And you look at the canvas as you pass. He permits it here. This is a court, not a chapel. And you see yourself with one day's work upon you. Your own face, startlingly finished, floating above a sketched storm of drapery, one hand blocked in and the other still a ghost. You look like a spirit assembling itself out of weather. You would stand and stare for an hour, but the next sitter's heels are already on the stair, and the servant with the fresh palette is already through the door, and the machine has no slot in it for wonder. Here is what happens to your portrait when you're not in the room, and this is the part no sitter is supposed to dwell on. Your face Van Dyck keeps for himself. The face is always his. But the borrowed satin you wore for an hour is worn again by nobody. It is dressed onto a wooden lay figure or hired shoulders and painted at leisure by the drapery men along the wall. And your hands. The account that survives is blunt about it. The studio keeps people of both sexes hired for this. Professional hands kept on call the way a stable keeps horses. If your own hands are judged less than ideal, too worked, too thin, too old, the hands in your portrait, the hands your great-grandchildren will point to under the picture light, may quite simply be someone else's. A hired girl's hands, holding your rose, wearing your rings. There is no record that any sitter ever objected. Think about what that silence means. They knew. They understood the bargain perfectly, because the bargain is the entire point of this studio. You do not come to Blackfriars to be recorded. You come to be improved, corrected, translated into the person you have always suspected you might be, 3 inches taller, with borrowed light on borrowed silk, and if necessary borrowed hands, the countesses hanging in their timeless amber, the general with his second best face. Every one of them walked out of here better than they walked in, and not one of them ever existed. 3 more sittings, your hour each, across a month. The last one is almost pleasant. Your body has learned the pose the way it learned the dances of your girlhood. The elbow has made peace. You have found the floating place behind your own eyes. The almost sleep, and the lutenist below plays sarabandes, and the brush whispers, and you let the machine have you. When the picture comes home, carted and crated, and is hung at last in the long gallery of your husband's house, you stand in front of it alone one evening with a candle. It is magnificent. It is serene. It is somewhat you, your face unmistakably caught in that surfacing moment he hunted for. And below your face, a stranger's perfect hands rest in amber silk you wore for 4 hours in a room above the Thames, and you feel, what? There, honestly, the record ends, and I will not invent an inner life and sell it to you as history. Whoever she was, whoever they all were, the gallery lights went out on them and the pictures kept their counsel. What the record does keep is this. When Sir Anthony van Dyck died at Blackfriars in December 1641, at 42, worn out, some said by work, and the work rate makes it believable, he was buried in Old St. Paul's Cathedral, a tradesman's son from Antwerp laid among bishops. The king had lost his painter. Within a decade the king had lost his head, and the courtiers in the amber silk were exiles, or corpses, or quietly ruined. But the portrait survived. That is the joke buried in all of it. The joke every sitter half knew as the clock struck and the bull came. The silk was borrowed, the hands were hired, the hour was rationed, and the faces outlived the entire world that sat for them. The portrait will outlive you. That is the point. That was always the point. It is also the problem. Forward again. A century and a quarter this time, and when you land in traffic. It is 11 o'clock on a March morning in 1765, and the west side of Leicester Fields, London, is jammed with carriages. Crested doors, matched horses, footmen in powder stamping their feet against the cold. They are all waiting outside one house, number 47, a tall brick townhouse that its owner bought 5 years ago for £1,650, and then rebuilt from the inside out, adding the one thing no ordinary gentleman's house has ever needed: a painting room and a gallery and a waiting parlour, because this is not a house that receives guests. It is a house that processes them. You're 22, married 8 months to a man whose money is newer than yours, and you have an appointment at 11 with Mr. Joshua Reynolds. You know it is 11 because everything here is 11, or 12, or 1. The great man keeps pocketbooks, small leather appointment diaries, 1 per year, and they survive to this day, which is why we can watch his practice with an accountant's clarity. The pages read like a coaching timetable: a lady at 10, a general at 11, a bishop at 12, a duchess at 1, an actress at 2. In his busiest years this man has run more than 150 sitters through this house in a single year. 5, sometimes 6 sittings a day, 6 days a week, while half the carriages of fashionable London queue at his door like drays at a brewery. Hilliard kept a chapel. Van Dyck kept a court. Reynolds keeps a factory, and everybody knows it. And, this is the marvellous part, being processed by the factory is the most fashionable experience in England. Your preparation for this morning began yesterday. I want you to understand what the chair costs a woman in 1765 before she ever reaches it. Yesterday afternoon, a hairdresser spent 3 hours building your head. Hair drawn up over pads, worked with pomatum, scented fat to be plain about it, then dusted white with powder, pinned and pinned, and pinned again into a structure you must now carry like a jug of water balanced on a ladder. You slept on it, or tried to, your neck propped so as not to wreck the architecture. This morning came the stays, laced until your ribs learned their manners, the hoops, the good grey lute-string silk, more pins. You have not drawn a full breath since 8 o'clock, and somewhere at the back of your scalp 1 hairpin out of the 50 is set a shade too deep. A small bright point of wrongness you will now carry through everything that follows. Count it. 3rd pin of the night. Inside, the house hums like a hive that has learned manners. A servant takes your cloak. In the parlour, waiting their own turns, sit a naval officer and an elderly dean. And through an open door you can see the gallery hung floor to ceiling with faces. Finished, half finished. Faces of people you know. Faces of people you know of. a wall of society looking down at society waiting on a sofa. That is part of the theatre, and none of it is accidental. You wait among the portraits so that you will want what the portraits have. At 11 precisely, you are shown up to the painting room, and it is not what you expected. Octagonal for one thing, 8 walls, so the light never corners anyone. One high window, its sill 9 feet up, so the light falls from above like weather through a skylight. The room smells of oil, turpentine, and snuff. The great man takes it constantly. There is a fine dark dust of it on everything he owns. And from a perch in the corner, unbelievably, a macaw the size of a cat regards you with one yellow eye. Sitters swear the bird despises them individually. You will come to agree. And in the middle of the room stands the chair. It is a fine chair. It is also 18 inches in the air. It stands on a small raised platform, a dais fitted with casters, so the whole throne can be wheeled and revolved to catch the light. And when you're handed up onto it, arranged, hoops settled, head carried high under its powdered tower, you find yourself enthroned above the room, looking down on the easel, the colour table, the macaw, and the most fashionable painter in the world. Take 1 second from up there and notice the view, you, raised and lit like the subject of an altarpiece, the whole room below arranged around your face. Every sitter remembers the chair. For 1 hour, 3 or 4 times in your life, the entire visible world is organised underneath you, waiting on your stillness. There are duchesses who are never again as central to anything as they are on that platform. It is the most flattering 17 inches of furniture in Europe, and it is still, make no mistake, a rack. The height means your feet find no honest floor. The casters mean the world occasionally rotates under you without warning, a slow, nauseating quarter turn, because the light has moved and you, the planet of this little system, must be moved with it. Reynolds himself is 41, thick-set, mild, scarred faintly by childhood smallpox, and deaf enough that an ear trumpet lies on the colour table. The legacy, he'll tell you cheerfully, of a cold caught in the draughts of the Vatican while he copied Raphael. The deafness has shaped the whole ritual. He comes close. He watches your lips. He arranges you with his own hands, respectfully precisely, a firm knuckle under your chin lifting it 1 degree. And then he retreats to the easel and takes up brushes on handles as long as walking sticks, so he can stand back by the canvas and paint you across the whole width of the room, striding forward and back, forward and back. Visitors who watched him work counted the walking and swore he covered miles in a sitting. You sit in the sky on your rolling throne. Below you a stout, deaf, snuff-dusted man advances and retreats like a fencer, and the macaw turns its head, and the long brush goes tick-tick against the palette. He is charming. Everyone says so, and everyone is right. The talk is easy, the questions gentle. The deafness, if anything, makes the attention more total. But you have been warned by friends who sat before you, and the warning holds. The charm is the anaesthetic. The surgery underneath proceeds on schedule regardless. 1 hour. Face first, always the face. Your grey silk is barely glanced at. And when you venture, carefully, brightly, the way one corrects a bishop, that the dress took some trouble and might deserve its likeness, there comes the phrase your friends promised you'd hear, or one of its cousins. The drapery will be attended to. Attended to. Learn what that means, madam, seated up there with your hairpin burning. It means that your gown will be painted beautifully by a man you will never meet. Reynolds keeps drapery specialists. There is a whole quiet trade of them in London. His favourite, a melancholy perfectionist named Peter Toms, paints silks and satins for half the fashionable portraits in England at so many guineas the figure, and is credited for none of them. When the finished picture is unveiled and your husband's friends praise the marvellous shimmer of the lute string, the shimmer will be Tom's, the face will be Reynolds. The only part of the enterprise that is entirely unassistedly you is the ache, which has arrived, by the way, on schedule, minute 40 between the shoulder blades, punctual across 2 centuries now, spreading its slow warm stain under the laced stays where no posture can shed it. Let's do the arithmetic of this room, because the arithmetic is the theatre. This year, a head by Reynolds, face and shoulders, the plainest article of the house, runs 30 guineas, a half length more, a full length on the order of 150. Your footman is paid £8 a year. The 30-guinea head, then, is 4 years of a working man's wages for one painted face. And the price is climbing as you sit, because the price always climbs. By the early 1780s, the same head will cost 50 guineas, and the queue outside will be longer, not shorter. Multiply the ledger the other way, 150 sitters in a year at these rates, and you begin to see what the pocketbooks are really recording. This octagonal room, this chair on wheels, this deaf man walking his miles, it is one of the most profitable machines in England, and its raw material is the vanity of people who can do arithmetic perfectly well and pay anyway. Because what are they paying for? Not resemblance, something better. It is the open joke of the age that Reynolds improves, that his children are all cherubs, his generals all thunder, his plain women all interestingly wise. The age wants the improvement. The age queues for it. But up on the chair, in your 4th and final sitting, you learn the other thing about this factory, the thing the queue prefers not to discuss. You've heard it as gossip. Sitting here watching him work, you understand it as fact. The great man experiments. He is restless about his materials the way alchemists were restless. Always a new medium, a new varnish. Wax, bitumen, and above all carmine, the loveliest, least faithful red in the paint box. The red he loves for exactly the blushing warmth it gives a living cheek. And carmine is fugitive. It fades. Already London dinner tables repeat the crack, attributed to more than one wit, so I'll give it to the age rather than the man. That one's picture by Reynolds dies before one does, that his colours fly, that the roses in the cheeks he paints wither faster than the cheeks themselves. Some of his sitters have watched their own painted faces go ghost pale within 10 years, the blush evaporating out of the canvas like scent out of a handkerchief, leaving a beautiful ash-coloured stranger over the mantel. Remember the Queen in 1596, burning the portraits that showed her old. Here is the joke inverted 2 centuries on. The sitter stays pink and the portrait ages first. You paid 4 years of a footman's wages for the permanent version of yourself, and the permanent version is mortal too. Nothing in this trade, nothing in tonight's whole story, holds entirely still. Not the sitter, not the paint. The last sitting ends the way everything in this house ends, on the hour. He hands you down from the throne himself. Your knees remember the floor slowly. The macaw dismisses you with the contempt it has shown dukes, and in the hall below, pulling on your gloves among the waiting faces of the 1 o'clock and the 2 o'clock, you feel, one last time before we leave the Georgians, that strange double feeling every sitter in this story has now felt in some key or other. Relief first, singing through every released muscle, and then, underneath it, unmistakably, the wish to go back up. Because for 4 hours of your one quick life, a room was arranged around your face as if your face were the most important object in the world. Nobody forgets that. That is the hook baited into the torture. That's why the carriages are triple parked in Leicester Fields. The portrait, when it comes, is lovely. The silk is Tom's. The wisdom in your eyes is Reynolds. The cheeks, you will notice around 1779, are quietly leaving. But there is one kind of sitting we have been circling all night without landing on it, and it is the cruellest of them all. Not because it hurts the body more, because the stakes are different. Every sitter so far has been posing for the wall, for posterity, for the gallery, for great-grandchildren who can't answer back. Now come sit for the portrait that will be opened, examined, and judged by one particular stranger on the other side of the sea, who is deciding, partly on the strength of it, whether to marry you. It is a wet Tuesday in November 1772, and you are 19, seated by the window of a miniature painter's rooms off the Strand in London, wearing your best pale blue, while your mother sits behind the painter's shoulder like a hawk on a fence post. The room smells of wet wool, coal, and something delicate underneath, ivory dust. Because the little oval on the painter's table is not vellum now. The trade moved on around the beginning of this century, and miniatures are painted on thin sawn ivory, translucent as a fingernail, which gives skin a glow vellum never managed. 2 inches of elephant tusk shaved to a whisper, on which your face is being assembled hair by hair. For a man you've met twice. He is a company man, 11 years older than you, gone out to Bengal with the East India Company 18 months ago, doing well by his letters. The families incline, the lawyers correspond, and the accepted instrument of courtship across 5,000 miles of ocean, the standard, ordinary, everybody-does-it instrument, is the one being manufactured at this table. Your face will go into a locket, the locket into a ship, the ship down the Thames and around Africa, 6 months at sea if the winds are kind. Sometime next summer, in the wet heat of Calcutta, a man will open a little gold case and look at this 2 inches of ivory and decide how he feels. Your mother has opinions about every stroke. Sit straighter. Don't let him make her nose so long. Is the mouth not too? She gropes for the crime. Too decided. The painter, a patient grey man who has painted 100 of these voyage brides, gives the same answer each time, mild as milk. Madam, I paint what sits before me. It is not quite true. Everyone in the room knows it is not quite true. That is precisely the negotiation. Because think, really think from the chair about what this little object has to do. If he paints you plainer than you are, you may lose a husband to 2 inches of ivory. If he paints you lovelier than you are, and here your stomach tightens because you're 19 and honest, then some day, in an upstairs room in Calcutta with the punkah creaking, a man's eyes will move from the locket to your face, and you will watch him perform the comparison. You will stand there, seasick-legged after half a year on a ship being checked against yourself, and you will know in one unguarded second of his face the verdict. Every sitter in England knows the name of that unguarded second. It happened to a king, and it has been governess taught, ballads sung and dinner table repeated for 200 years, and while the grey man paints your mouth, too decided or not, your mother, inevitable as weather, begins to tell it again. The story of Anne of Cleves. So let's tell it properly, because your mother has some details wrong, and this one is documented to the bone. In 1539, Henry VIII of England was 3 years a widower, fat, wound sick, and dangerous, and his chief minister Thomas Cromwell was hunting him a fourth wife who would bolt Protestant Germany to England's side. The candidates were the two sisters of the Duke of Cleves, Anne, 24, and Amelia the younger. Henry, to his credit as a portrait man, refused to bargain blind. He did what any prudent suitor of the age did at long distance, only with the best hardware in Europe. He sent a painter, and not any painter, Hans Holbein the younger, King's painter, the most unsparing eye of the century, the man whose faces are so present, so exactly weighed, that even now, 500 years on, you feel you could be introduced to them. Holbein travelled that summer to the duchy, and at the castle of Düren the two sisters were brought out to sit. Picture Anne's chair, because we've sat in every other chair tonight. A German princess, modestly raised, sitting very still in her stiff Netherlandish finery under the gaze of a foreign painter, knowing with total clarity that the little panel drying on his table is not a portrait. It is a verdict in waiting. It will be carried to a king she has never met, weighed against her sister's face, weighed against a French candidate or two, and on its evidence her entire life will be assigned. If any sitting in tonight's story deserves the word torture, it is not the longest one. It is this one, the one where the stillness is easy and the stakes are everything. And here is the wrinkle history hands us. By every surviving account, Holbein did his job straight. The English envoy on the spot, Nicholas Wotton, wrote home that Holbein had captured the sisters' very lively image. A true likeness, he was saying. Wotton, who saw Anne daily, signed off on the resemblance. The famous portrait that resulted, you can stand in front of it in the Louvre today, shows a calm, pleasant-faced young woman, full face, symmetrical, gentle-eyed, in cloth of gold. People sometimes say Holbein flattered her. That is the one thing the paperwork does not support. What the full face view chose not to show, a profile, an angle, historians still argue over, and I'll leave the arguing to them. That part is speculation, and I promised to flag speculation when I sold you documentation. Henry looked at the panel. Henry liked the panel. The treaty was signed in the autumn of 1539, and Anne set out for England in December, through Calais, across a winter channel, to be queen. And on New Year's Day, 1540, at Rochester, the disaster arrived on schedule, and it is one of the best documented humiliations in English history, sworn to in later testimony by the men who watched it. Henry, giddy as a boy, decided to surprise his bride incognito, an old game of chivalry. The king slips in disguised. The destined lady's heart recognises him, though her eyes cannot. He burst into her chamber with a handful of gentlemen, all cloaked alike, and embraced her. Anne had been standing at a window, absorbed in watching a bull baiting in the courtyard below. She did not recognise him. Why would she? She'd never seen him, and whatever image of Henry she'd been shown was 30 years of appetite out of date, which is its own sermon on tonight's subject. She found a fat stranger handling her, endured it with frosty Germanic correctness, and turned back to the window, to the bulls. The King of England stood in the middle of the room in costume unrecognised, publicly deflated before his own gentlemen. He went out, changed into purple, and came back as himself, and everyone bowed and pretended the first entrance hadn't happened. But it had happened, and Henry, this is the part that matters to every sitter forever after. Henry did not blame his own game, or his own 30-year-old self-image. He came away muttering the sentence that would be repeated in depositions, "I like her not." To Cromwell he was blunter still. "I see nothing in this woman as men report of her." Men, and the portrait. The likeness got the blame. The 2 inches of honest Holbein took the fall for a king's wounded vanity at a window. He married her anyway. The diplomacy was too far gone to stop. On the 6th of January 1540, hating every minute. By the 9th of July the marriage was annulled, unconsummated by his own extensive testimony. And then the consequences fell, and notice with care where they fell and where they did not. Thomas Cromwell, the marriage's architect, went to the block that same month. The Cleves fiasco, one heavy stone in the sack that sank him. Holbein, interestingly, survived. He remained king's painter until his death in 1543. Even Henry, it seems, could not quite convict the man of painting what Wotton swore was there. And Anne of Cleves, the rejected sitter, the woman checked against her own portrait in front of witnesses and found, by one bloated tyrant on one bad day, wanting, Anne negotiated. She accepted the annulment without a fight, and walked away with a settlement that should be taught in schools. Richmond Palace, Hever Castle, her predecessor Anne Boleyn's childhood home, history having a taste for irony, a handsome income, and official precedence as the king's beloved sister. She stayed in England, kept her head and her houses through every purge that followed, danced at court when it suited her, and died in her bed in July 1557, having outlived Henry and every one of his other 5 wives. The portrait that supposedly ruined her hangs in the Louvre. The King Who Liked Her Not is a cautionary tale about arteries. On any fair reckoning of that old affair, the sitter won. One more thing, since your mother will repeat it. The sneer you may have heard, that Henry called her the Flanders mare. No one wrote that down in 1540. It surfaces generations later, second-hand at best, a later age putting a crueler word in a cruel man's mouth. The documented cruelty was quieter. I like her not. 4 words into a portrait's face. That was enough. The grey man off the Strand finishes your ivory in 3 sittings. At the last one, he does something none of tonight's painters has done. He puts the miniature into your own hand and lets you judge it, because for once the sitter is not the client. You are the goods, but your family holds the purse, and besides, he wants you to sail easy. You look for a long moment at the girl on the ivory. She is you, perhaps on your best morning, not a lie, a kindness at the outer edge of the truth, the mouth you note, with a small private pleasure your mother does not see, is exactly as decided as your own. It goes into the locket goes into the ship, and the following autumn, because you deserve one mercy tonight, and because for the composite thousands this girl stands for, the record really does hold thousands of such landings, most of them, by the plain arithmetic of all those Calcutta marriages, unremarkable. The comparison second comes in a bright hot room smelling of river mud and cloves, and the man's eyes go from the ivory to your face, and what crosses his is not disappointment. It is relief, and then something warmer. The portrait for once told the truth, and the truth was received kindly. But you never forget the half-second before his eyes came up. Nobody who was ever sent ahead of themselves as a picture forgets it. Anne of Cleves stood in that half-second for 400 years of sitters, at a window, watching the bulls, about to be liked or not. Hold still. It's almost the worst part now. It's almost over. Cross the ocean now and come down in the snow. It is a Thursday afternoon in late February 1836, on a hill farm in the border country where Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New York State lean into each other, and you're a farmer's wife of 34 sitting in your own parlour on your own second-best chair, which has been turned to face the window. The room smells of wood smoke, tallow, wet wool drying by the stove, and, threading through all of it, new and sharp as a city visitor, linseed oil and turpentine, because there is a stranger in your parlour. He arrived yesterday at dusk with a sleigh, a trunk, rolled canvas, and a folding easel, and he is at this moment mixing, on a small palette, out of powders and oil, the exact winter afternoon colour of your face. This is the itinerant limner, the travelling portrait man, and in the America of the 1830s he is a whole profession, a migratory species. They work the river towns and the hill roads season after season, paint a merchant in this village, a deacon's wife in that one, sleep in the customers' spare rooms, eat at their tables, take some of the fee in board and oats for the horse, and move on. Men like Amy Phillips, a real one, and one of the best, worked this exact border country for 50 years, from farm parlour to farm parlour, leaving behind him hundreds of level-eyed faces in black and white, and one astonishing red. And the record of his life is thin as frost. Born 1788, died 1865, forever in between places. The painters themselves slip through history sideways. It's the sitters who stay. Understand what has arrived in your parlour, though. For 300 years, everything we've watched tonight, the goldsmith's chapel, the silk machine on the Thames, the throne on casters, belong to people with crests on their carriage doors. A queen could burn her bad portraits. A knight's wife could buy Van Dyck's hour. But you churn butter. You've buried one child and raised 5. No one in your family going back to the beginning of the world has ever had a face. And now the facemaker comes up your own road, and his prices are the revolution. This is the era when a Boston-trained journeyman named William Matthew Pryor put a notice in the newspaper, 1831, and you can still read it, offering a full likeness, shaded, modelled, the whole art, at his regular rate, but adding, persons wishing for a flat picture can have a likeness without shade or shadow at 1/4 price. Read that twice. A menu. Portraiture with a budget option. 1/4. The money buys you a flatter, simpler, quicker you. Same eyes, same soul, less chiaroscuro. The grand tradition of Van Dyck and Reynolds, arriving in a farm kitchen as a price list, and nobody in Europe's academies would believe it, and it is one of the most purely American documents ever printed. Your husband, after 2 evenings of arithmetic at the kitchen table, has gone middle of the menu. Not the 1/4 price flat work. There is pride at stake. The Hollisters across the valley had shaded portraits done in November, but not the fanciest article either. A pair of likenesses, man and wife, honest dollars each, plus the stranger's board and his horse's keep. Paid partly in coin, and, this is normal, the painters take what the country has, partly in smoked pork and a sack of oats. So now you sit. And here is what nobody warned you, and what every farm sitter in America is discovering this same decade in 1,000 cold parlours. Sitting still is work, and it is work of a kind your life has never once asked of you. Think of your hands. Since you were 6 years old, your hands have never been empty in daylight. Milking, carding, kneading, mending, scolding, wringing. Your hands are the engine of the household, and now they lie in your lap, folded on your good dress, doing nothing, and the doing nothing runs up your arms like an itch. Your body keeps offering to work. The fire needs a log. Your legs actually start twice before you catch them. Through the window you can see the path to the barn, and every crossing shadow is a chore calling your name. The painter says the thing painters have said since Hilliard said it in silk. Just still now, ma'am. Hold still. To a woman who has earned her sleep every night of her life with her hands, stillness doesn't feel like rest. It feels like theft. You are stealing these hours from the farm, sitting here like gentry, like an invalid, like a picture, and the guilt of it sits on your chest heavier than the ache, which arrives anyway, minute 40 between the shoulder blades, faithful as a collie, the same ache that found the gentleman in his ruff and the lady on her rolling throne, perfectly democratic at last. And yet, the parlour sitting is different from every sitting we've watched tonight, and the difference is the room. There is no studio door here, no appointment book, no macaw. Your household spectates. The two youngest are heaped on the stairs, forbidden to speak, vibrating. Your eldest daughter shells beans by the stove slowly so as not to crackle. Your husband finds reasons to pass through, 4 times now, and each time stops behind the easel and looks from the canvas to you and back with an expression you cannot read and will remember forever. There is no mystery, no covering hand, no you'll see it when it's true. The picture grows in public, in firelight, in your own house, while the family watches their mother turn into a painting. The torture is the same. The loneliness is gone. The painter talks in his unhurried roadside way, and his talk is the news of the world. Which valley got the railroad survey? What they're charging for likenesses in Hartford? Which meeting house burned? Ask him the question everyone asks. How many faces, mister? And he'll consider, brush going tick against the palette, and allow that between the Hudson and the Connecticut he's likely made more people than some towns hold. Then he says the thing you'll still be turning over at haying time, the closest thing to a philosophy the roads have taught him. Folks think they're paying me to show what they look like, he says, not stopping, eyes moving between your face and the canvas at his steady pendulum pace. They ain't. They're paying for how they mean to be remembered. Different article entirely. And I get the two of them as close as paint allows. Let me be honest with you about one legend, since we're in the parlour where the legend lives. You'll hear it said for the next 200 years, that these travelling men carried stacks of pre-painted headless bodies, ready-made gowns and coats on canvas, and simply dropped each customer's face onto the next torso in the pile, portraitures ready to wear. It's a wonderful story, and the people who study these painters have gone looking for those headless stacks, and mostly they haven't found them. The surviving evidence says the work was faster than that legend and honester than that sneer. Likeness first, body blocked in quick. Conventions repeated because conventions sell, not because torsos came by the dozen. I tell you both, the story and the finding, because I promised you all night I'd draw the line where the record draws it. The flat price menu is paper documented fact. The headless bodies are, so far as anyone can prove, mostly a joke told later at the dead painter's expense. They can't answer. Their faces answer for them by the thousands from the walls of every historical society in New England. 2 afternoons your portrait takes. These men work fast. Speed is the whole economy of it. And part of a third for your husband, who goes to the chair scoffing and within the hour is sitting straighter than he has sat in church. One hand tucked into his coat front because the painter suggested it, and something in him rose to it. You watch from the doorway, and you understand, watching him, what you must have looked like. A working body, bewildered by stillness, slowly accepting the outrageous idea that it deserves to be recorded, that its face is worth keeping. There is one more likeness the painter is asked to make before the sleigh goes, and I will step carefully here, because this is the tenderest documented corner of the whole trade. It is your neighbour a mile down the valley who asks, quietly, hat in his hands, at the kitchen door. His daughter died in January, 8 years old, and the thing these travelling painters were asked to do, again and again, all across that century, the ledgers and the surviving pictures prove it, was to paint the dead. Sometimes from a sketch made too late, sometimes from the family's description alone, the little portrait done afterward. The child seated, rosy, upright, holding a flower with maybe one quiet emblem, a broken stem, a bird flown to a windowsill, to say what the rosy paint could not. Morning portraits, the books call them now. In the valley they just say having her taken. The painter packs his trunk for the extra day without a word about the fee, and that in one kitchen door transaction is the entire case for tonight's strange torture. The answer to every cramped neck and stolen afternoon since Gutter Lane, because there is one sitter who cannot sit, one face the eye of love holds, and still, year by year, feels slipping. Against that slipping, the whole ridiculous ordeal, the pins, the aches, the hours, the money, was always the only weapon anybody had. You hold still so that something holds still. In the end, it was never vanity in the chair. It was mortality, dressed up. Your two portraits are hung in the parlour before spring ploughing, facing the window, and on the first evening your whole family stands and looks at them in lamplight, and nobody says anything clever. The painted woman's hands lie folded in her lap, unashamed, at rest, the way yours, 10,000 chores from now, will finally get to be. His sleigh bells go down the hill road on a Tuesday, thin in the cold air, off toward the next village that has no faces yet. And now Paris, now the one we've been walking toward all night. Everything tonight has been building a single quiet argument, that a portrait sitting is a war, the sitter fighting for the self they mean to be, the painter fighting for the truth he can see, and the world waiting outside the studio door to judge the treaty. In every chapter so far the war ended in compromise, a flattering ivory, a borrowed silk, a fading cheek. Now watch, once, what happens when it doesn't. Because in the spring of 1884, the treaty failed in public in front of all of Paris, and both people in the room lost. The chair this time belongs to a real woman, every sitting of it documented, so I'll tell this one standing at her shoulder rather than inside her head, and when the record goes silent on what she felt, I'll say so, and you can feel it for her. You've earned that tonight. You know the chair by now. Her name is Virginie Amélie Gautreau. Notice the middle name. She goes by Amélie, and she is American. That always surprises people. Born in New Orleans in January 1859 to a Creole family of French descent. Her father, Anatole Avegno, raised a Louisiana battalion in the Civil War and died of wounds taken at Shiloh in 1862, when she was 3. Her mother took the girls, and what money the war left, to Paris. And there Amélie grew up into something for which 1880s Paris had an official, almost professional category, a celebrated beauty. At 19, she married Pierre Gautreau, a banker and shipping man, respectable and rich and considerably older, and by her early 20s her entrances were events. Newspapers noted what she wore, crowds at the opera turned, and her beauty was not the ordinary kind. This matters, so hold it. It was constructed, theatrical, almost defiant. Her hair was hennaed to a deep red. Her skin, and every memoir of the period mentions it, was powdered to an extraordinary tone. A pale, matte, lavender-tinged white, the famous violet powder, worn over face, shoulders, arms, ears, everything, so that by gaslight she looked less like a woman who was pale and more like a woman made of some other better material. Moonlit marble, New Orleans by way of the moon. She did not have a look. She had an aesthetic, self-authored, maintained at obvious cost and obvious effort, and Paris couldn't stop staring, and she knew it, and staring back was the whole performance. Enter, in 1883, a 27-year-old American painter named John Singer Sargent, Florence-born, Paris-trained, ferociously gifted, ambitious in the specific calculating way of a man who knows he is better than his current reputation. And here is the detail that turns the whole tragedy. She did not commission him. He pursued her. His letter to a mutual friend, Ben del Castillo, survives, and it is practically a hunting license. "I have a great desire to paint her portrait," he wrote, and reason to think she would allow it, and that she was waiting for someone to propose this homage to her beauty. Read the calculation in that, the most looked-at woman in Paris, and the young painter who intends the Salon to gasp. No fee, in the usual sense, changed hands that mattered. The payment, for both of them, was going to be the sensation. Two people who had each spent years perfecting how they were seen, agreeing to be seen together. Every previous sitter tonight bought their portrait. These two invested in it, jointly. Remember that when the crash comes. The sittings began in earnest in the summer of 1883 at the Gautreau's country house, Les Chênes, at Paramé on the Brittany coast, and they were, by the painter's own written testimony, a battle. Roughly 30 attempts survive: pencil, watercolour, oil, Amélie standing, Amélie seated, Amélie in profile raising a glass, Amélie on a sofa, a whole museum of false starts. She was, it turned out, a terrible sitter. Restless, bored, endlessly interruptible. The house was full of guests, the beach was near, she had a small daughter and a social calendar even in Brittany. Sargent's letters from those months have the sound of a man ground down. He wrote to one friend of struggling with the unpaintable beauty and hopeless laziness of Madame Gautreau. Unpaintable, from him, is close to a scream. The great professional seer had finally met a face that had its own opinions about how it should be seen. Two artists, one canvas, and the summer light going. What finally unlocked it was a pose taken, the story goes, from Life Between Poses, Amélie at a little round table turning away. He froze her mid-turn. The body faces you. The head is wrenched into pure profile. That fierce, upturned, coin-perfect profile. Chin lifted, one arm braced on the table behind her, the hand twisted against the tabletop in a way that looks elegant at a glance, and anatomically furious the longer you look. The black satin dress, its bodice cut straight and low, held up by two thin straps set with brilliants. Against all that black and that lavender-white skin, she looks like an emblem of something, rather than a picture of someone. Which was, of course, the intention. Both of theirs. Now sit in that pose, Once, briefly with your own body, you've done 8 hours of other people's poses tonight. You know the drill. Head hard right until your neck chords. Chin up, arm back, wrist twisted. That is not a resting position. That is a held note. And she held it, session after session, into the autumn back in Paris, while he scraped faces off and started again. The lavender skin tone alone defeated him for weeks. Get it wrong by a breath, and marble becomes corpse. Whatever else Paris later said about Amélie Gautreau, say this for her first. The pose that made her immortal hurt, and she held it. And on one of those days, no one wrote down which, and the painting itself is the only witness. The right strap of the black dress was allowed to slip from her shoulder, and Sargent painted it where it fell, off the shoulder, hanging against her arm, glittering. Every pin, every lace, every strap in tonight's story has been marching toward this one, a single fallen strap. On the canvas, it changed the sentence of the picture from as to has just been a dress that has just begun to come down, a statue caught in a human second. He knew exactly what it said. So presumably did she. She of all people knew what every millimetre of her appearance said. Neither of them blinked. The Salon would gasp. That was the business plan. The Salon of 1884 opened at the Palais des Champs-Élysées at the start of May. The catalogue, with that era's fig-leaf discretion, listed the picture under a title that named nobody. Portrait of Madame 3 stars, 3 little asterisks standing where a name should be, as if the profile in question could belong to anyone else in France. And the gasp came. It was just the wrong gasp. The mockery started at the vernissage and never stopped. Crowds packed in front of the picture all day. That part of the plan worked flawlessly, but they came to jeer. Witnesses wrote it down while it was happening. Ralph Curtis, Sargent's cousin, left a letter describing the day like a man describing a shipwreck from the rail. The colour of her skin, that hard-won lavender white, was called cadaverous, decomposed. Wits said she looked blue, looked dead, looked like a corpse dressed for the opera. The pose was called grotesque, and the strap. The strap was called what 1884 called such things, indecent. Not nude. Salon walls were full of safely mythological nudes that very year, and nobody blinked. This was worse than nude. This was a real named living society wife, in a real dress, one strap down. Caricatures ran in the papers within days. Strangers laughed out loud in front of her painted face. The joke of the season had been hung at eye level, and Paris filed past it in its thousands, and Amélie came to see it. She and her mother moved through that crowd, through her own crowd, the crowd she had commanded for a decade, and stood at the edge of the laughter in front of 25 square feet of her own body and listened. What that felt. No document records. I promise to tell you when the record goes quiet, and here it goes quiet. But her family's next move is documented to the hour, and you can read the feeling straight through it. That same evening, her mother, Madame Avegno, stormed into Sargent's studio on the Boulevard Berthier. Curtis was there and wrote it down. "All Paris is mocking my daughter," she said. "She is ruined. My people will be forced to defend themselves. She will die of chagrin. Take it down. Withdraw the picture." Sargent refused. Partly he hid behind the rules. The Salon did not permit paintings to be withdrawn mid-exhibition, which was true. But his other answer was the one that matters to tonight's story. The painter's answer of the whole 4 centuries. He had painted her, he said, exactly as she was dressed. Nothing on that canvas that had not been the room. It was true, and it was no defence at all, because the sitting had never been about what was in the room. It never is. 50 portraits into tonight. You know that better than he did at 28. The sitter is never buying what was in the room. She is buying the self she meant. And hanging in the Palais des Champs-Élysées, in front of all Paris, was a self nobody had meant, assembled with total technical perfection out of her materials by his eye. So the picture stayed on the wall until the Salon closed, doing its damage every public day. Both of them lost, exactly as I promised. Amélie Gautreau kept her marriage and her houses, but the empire of attention she had built was broken. The crowds that had parted for her now smirked, and the professional beauty of Paris learned what the queue at the guillotine of fashion learns, that the same public that makes you is delighted to unmake you. And Sargent, the portrait he'd engineered to conquer Paris, ended his Paris. The French commissions dried up like rain on a stove. Within 2 years he had moved himself and his career to London, and America and England got the greatest portrait painter of the age because Paris had laughed him off the field over one woman's shoulder. 2 last strokes, and both are documented, and both are perfect. Some time after the Salon, the scholarship can see it in the paint, though no diary dates the day. Sargent took the picture, which no one now wanted, back to his studio and repainted the strap, lifted it, set it back on her shoulder, secure, upright, decent, where it has stayed ever since. The most famous wardrobe correction in art history, made years too late, in an empty room to a reputation already spent. And he kept the painting. For over 30 years it stood in his studios, London and elsewhere, facing the wall of his own career until 1916. Amélie Gautreau had died the year before, in 1915, her later portraits by gentler painters never quite giving her back what 1884 took. And then Sargent sold it at last to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York for £1,000, with 2 conditions attached in his own hand: that the museum disguise her name, which is why, forever, she is Madame X. And 1 sentence of appraisal from the man who had painted every crowned and moneyed head of his era, which the museum has never had any reason to doubt. I suppose it is the best thing I have done. The best thing I have done. About the picture that emptied a woman's world and drove him out of France. Both of those facts are true at once, and neither cancels the other. And if you want tonight's whole story in one object, it hangs in Gallery 771. The finest portrait of its century, wearing a repainted strap like a scar, named after the one thing the sitter had left to keep. She held still. It cost her everything, and it made her permanent, and no one on earth can tell you whether that was a bad trade, because the only person who could judge it never said another public word about it. Breathe now. The worst of tonight is behind you. From here, the story only ever gets gentler and shorter and quieter, all the way down to the pillow. Because while Sargent was still scraping lavender skin tones off canvas in Brittany, the thing that would end the whole 400-year ordeal had already been loose in the world for 40 years. It had arrived in Paris, of course it arrived in Paris, in 1839, when the painter and showman Louis Daguerre gave his process to the public. An image made not by a hand and an eye and 100 hours, but by light itself, falling on a silvered plate, keeping what it touched. In January of that year the invention was announced. By the 19th of August the working details were read out to a joint session of the Academies of Science and Art, and given away, free, to everyone. And within months, All over the world, people were sitting for their portraits in a completely new way. Notice, though, what those first photographic sittings actually were. Because for one strange transitional decade, the new miracle was simply tonight's old torture, concentrated. The earliest exposures ran long, many minutes of total stillness in punishing direct sun, eyes watering, face clenched. And so the first thing the new trade invented, almost before it invented anything else, was equipment for enforced stillness. The iron headrest, the posing stand, a clamp on a heavy base, hidden behind the sitter, cradling the skull, the very braces and stands this whole night has been promising you. 4 centuries of murmured hold still, finely cast in actual iron. The strange rooms that grew up around those clamps, the velvet studios where nobody smiled and everybody gripped the chair arm like a mast. That's a story this channel has already spent a whole night inside, so tonight we'll just tip our hat to it as we drift past the doorway. Because what matters to our story is not the clamp, it's the clock. The chemistry improved almost monthly. Better lenses, better plates, and the exposure came down and down and down. Minutes became a minute became 20 seconds, then 5, then 1. By the 1850s and 60s, cheap portrait photographs, a day's wage, then an hour's, were being made by the million. The farmer's wife, who once weighed 2 afternoons of stolen farm time against her own face, could now be taken between errands. In 1888, a man in Rochester, New York, named George Eastman, began selling a camera called the Kodak, with a slogan that would have made every painter in tonight's story put down his brush and stare. You press the button, we do the rest. And in 1900 came his brownie, a cardboard box costing $1, and with it the end, forever, of the sitting as an ordeal. The tyranny that opened tonight's story in minute 40 of a pose had shrunk to a 40th of a second. The exact same transaction, a face held still, made permanent, that once cost a Tudor gentleman 6 hours and a season's wages now cost less than a sneeze. And here, in the quiet after all of it, is where the whole night folds together. Because think back now, slowly, drowsily, no quiz, just let them file past, at everything the chair demanded, and watch what became of each demand. The stillness itself, first, the ache between the shoulder blades, minute 40, that found you in the goldsmith's room and the silk machine and the rolling throne and the cold parlour, faithful as a bell, retired, pensioned off by the shutter. No human being would ever again need to hold their face like a brimming cup while their spine filled slowly with sand. A 40th of a second asks nothing of a spine. Of all the obsolete sufferings history has shed, and this channel has catalogued a few, the portrait ache is one of the very few that vanished completely, absolutely, without survivors. Your own shoulders right now, wherever you are, a line in the world that abolished it. Let them notice that. Let them drop a little further into the mattress on the strength of it. The polite lie, second, it will only take an hour. Hilliard's hour that was 3 sittings. Van Dyck's hour that was 4 appointments and a drapery man's fortnight. Reynolds's hour ticked into the pocketbooks, 5 sitters a day. The hour was never an hour, all night, not once, until the camera came, and then it wasn't even an hour. The oldest broken promise of the studio was finally kept by a machine, kept so thoroughly that the promise itself became meaningless. Nobody has ever had to promise you a photograph would be quick. The rigging, third. The pin at the Tudor shoulder that drew its bead of blood. the pin holding borrowed amber satin above a hired heart, the 50 pins under the powdered tower, and the last strap of all, the glittering one, fallen against a lavender arm in front of all Paris, then lifted, years too late, by the same hand that painted it down. All that scaffolding of glory, all those small sharp points pressed secretly into flesh for the sake of the picture, gone soft now, gone harmless. The pins of this story are in museum drawers. Nothing is holding you together tonight but blankets, and nothing about you needs holding. The hunger to see the result, forth, and its dark twin, the power to destroy it. Hilliard's shielding hand over the half-born face, not yet. The Queen's men in 1596, hunting the unflattering likeness through the parishes to deface it. Anne of Cleves blamed by a king for the crime of resembling herself and outliving everyone who laughed. Madame Avegno in the Boulevard Berthier studio, begging the one destruction that was ever truly deserved and being refused, and the refused painting ending as the treasure of a museum under the name that hid her daughter. 4 centuries of people trying to see themselves before it was too late, and to burn the versions they couldn't bear. Keep that 1/2 second longer than the others, because it's the one we never actually gave up. It just moved house. It lives in your pocket now. Because, and this is the last thought of the night that asks anything of you at all, and it asks almost nothing, you sat for your portrait today. Almost certainly. Some camera somewhere held your face today. A doorway, a video call, a passing phone, your own. The average person now is portrayed more times in a year than a Tudor monarch was in a reign. And when you turn the lens on yourself, you perform in miniature, in seconds, every single role of tonight's story at once. You are the sitter, angling for the self, you mean. You are the painter, choosing the light, hunting the lightning. You are Elizabeth's privy council, thumbing through the results, defacing the unseemly ones with a flick. Delete, delete. An image purge conducted in a bus queue against pictures for the crime of resemblance. And you are sometimes for a heartbeat Amélie at the edge of the crowd, seeing a version of your own face the world caught without your permission, and learning all over again the oldest lesson in the chair, that being seen and controlling what is seen are 2 different wishes, and no century has ever granted both. The strange torture of sitting for your own portrait never ended, you see. It just got so fast and so constant that it stopped hurting the body and settled somewhere quieter. The neck braces went to the museums. The war came with us, but not tonight. Tonight the war is over, because tonight you are on the one side of the easel where nothing is required of you. No lens is open, no eye is weighing. The light in your room is bad and it doesn't matter. Your hair is doing whatever it wants and it doesn't matter. Your face, the face that would have cost 4 years of a footman's wages to preserve, the face a limner would have crossed 3 counties through the snow to take. Your face is off duty, unrecorded, unjudged, unposed, sinking into a pillow, making an expression no one will ever see, which is the single greatest luxury in this entire story, and it is yours for free all night, every night. So spend it lavishly. Let your face do nothing at all, and while it does nothing, let me walk you back through the rooms one last time. Slowly now, the way a caretaker walks a gallery at closing time, turning down the lamps. No more surprises live in these rooms. You know them all. That's what makes this part of the night so good. Everything from here on is familiar, and familiar is the door sleep uses. The goldsmith's room first, at the top of the gutter lane stairs. It's evening there now, in whatever evening the past keeps. The north window has gone soft and blue, the colour of milk in shadow. The brushes stand in their jar, points upward, clean, fine as whiskers, at rest. Somewhere in a drawer in the dark on the back of an ace of hearts, a young man's face is listening forever to a question asked in 1587, wearing the exact expression of a lady he never got an answer from. The dust that was forbidden all day is settling now, slowly, harmlessly, on nothing that matters. Even the strictest room in England has to let the dust come down at night, even Hilliard's. The lightning is all caught and boxed, and the sky it was stolen from, the quick, worried, hopeful face of a second son, has been asleep these 400 years, past all itching, past all pins. The house at Blackfriars next, with the river running past it in the dark, saying the one long unimportant thing rivers say. The appointment book is closed. The clock that governed the hours has no one left to govern. In the racks along the studio wall the half-born portraits wait without impatience. The general who is all face, the countess without hands, and they will wait exactly as contentedly for a decade as for a night, because waiting is the whole of what a painting does, and paintings are magnificent at it. The amber silk lies folded in its press, dreaming of nobody's shoulders. The lutenist has gone home. On the landing stage the tide comes up the steps and pauses and thinks better of it and goes back down, the way it has 10,000 times since a king last stepped ashore there, and not one arrival in all those tides has been announced, or painted, or judged. Leicester Fields, and the carriages are gone. The waiting parlour holds only the faces on its walls now, society looking down at empty sofas, and the faces don't mind. This is the secret you've earned tonight. Walking through all these rooms, the faces never minded anything. All the minding was done by the sitters, in the chair, in the aching hour, and the sitter set the minding down when they stood up, and the faces kept only the calm. Every portrait on every wall in the world is a receipt for an hour of discomfort, paid out in centuries of perfect ease. The octagonal room is dark. The throne on casters stands 18 inches above the floorboards with no one to enthrone, and the high window is 9 feet of night sky, and the macaw sleeps standing head under wing, dismissing dukes in its dreams. The little rooms off the Strand where the ivory ovals were made, dark too, and quiet, and scattered now, honestly, 'cause the trade scattered, but somewhere in the world tonight, in museum drawers and estate boxes and locked cabinets, thousands of those voyage brides are still crossing their oceans, 2 inches tall, sealed in gold, each one an act of hope at the outer edge of the truth. The ships came in long ago. The comparisons were made, kindly or unkindly, and grieved over or laughed over, and buried with the people who made them. What's left is only the hope itself, painted hair by hair, holding steady under glass. If you ever want to know what human beings are, at the bottom, under the wars and the prices, they are creatures who, before a 6-month voyage toward a stranger, sit very still by a window, trying to look true and lovable at the same time. That is us. That has always been us. And the farm parlour, last of the painted rooms, on its hill in the border country. The stove is banked. The snow has that blue night shine on it, all the way down to the road the sleigh bells went. On the wall by the window, a man with his hand in his coat front and a woman with her hands at rest in her lap look out over the dark room where their children slept, and their children's children after, keeping the only watch they were ever asked to keep, which is no watch at all, just presence, just the low, kind, permanent statement every portrait in tonight's story was really commissioned to make. Under all the vanity and the guineas, we were here. We had faces. Remember us as we meant to be. Even Paris is quiet now. Gallery 771 closes at night like any room. The crowds that laughed in 1884 are further beyond answering than she is. The caricatures went to landfill a century ago, and the woman in black satin stands in the dark with her strap on her shoulder, under forever the correction outlasting the scandal, with her chin lifted at the angle she chose, or he chose, or they chose together, being exactly what the painter said she was in 1916, the best thing he had done. The museum dims its lights, and she doesn't fall out of the pose. That's the mercy hiding at the end of her story, the one nobody in 1884 could see. The pose stopped hurting the moment it became paint. For 140 years now, it hasn't cost her anything at all. The war is over in every room, do you see? Every room. There is not one sitter left holding still anywhere in tonight's story. Every neck has been released. Every elbow has come down. Every pin has been drawn out. Every lace loosened. Every powdered tower taken down and brushed out by some patient maid 2.5 centuries dead. And every single body that ached in every chair we sat in tonight has had its long, long lie down, is having it now. The deepest stillness there is, the one that finally asks nothing, and their faces stayed up here without them, doing the light work, the forever work, so the bodies could rest. And your body is doing tonight, voluntarily, luxuriously, what all of theirs were paid and pinned and braced to do. Have you noticed? You are holding still. You've been holding still for a long while now, listening. But nobody is painting you, and that changes everything about it. Stillness under an eye is torture. The whole night has been one long proof of that. Stillness under no eye at all. Stillness in the dark, unrecorded, unjudged, with the face off duty and the shoulders sinking. That is the oldest comfort the body knows. Same posture, opposite meaning. You are on the free side of the easel, the side where stillness isn't the price of anything. It's just rest, wearing rest's own clothes. So let's take the sitter's discipline. You learned it tonight in 6 rooms. You're qualified now, and use it one last time for yourself, for nothing. Settle the pose, any pose. The one you're in is correct. That's the beauty of the studio. Whatever the body has chosen is the approved pattern, the official likeness. No privy council to please. Let the head find its cushion the way the lady found the dais, except softer, except aloud. Let the hands lie wherever they've fallen. No one will paint them. No one will hire better ones. They were always good enough, those hands. They were always exactly the hands. Now do the trick. The one every sitter found by the 3rd hour in every century in every chair. Go somewhere else. Slip just behind your own face and let it stand empty at the window, a house with the master away. You've practiced this without knowing every night of your life. The face slackens, the weather system's calm, the lovely graces and the witty smilings furl themselves up like flags at sundown, and what's left is the plain, ancient, unpainted face of a sleeping person, which no artist in 400 years ever managed to catch, because it only comes out when every eye is gone. You're still enough now, truly still enough. Still enough for Hilliard, who asks 6 hours and would marvel at how easily you give it. Still enough for the hour at Blackfriars, and no clock striking at the end of it, no bow, no next sitter on the stair. Still enough for the longest exposure Daguerre ever needed. Minutes of sunlight, and you could hold it now without a clamp, without a brace, without one iron finger at the back of your skull, because nothing is gripping you anywhere and nothing needs to. You have a bed and a dark room and a face no one is looking at. That's more than the Queen of England had on the night she lay awake beneath her own perfect, untrue, state-approved face. That's more than the beauty of Paris had, the year all the looking turned. You have the one thing, the whole glittering procession of them, queens and countesses, brides and beauties, could not buy at any price in any century an unobserved night. That's enough. By every measure this long story knows that's more than enough. Tomorrow the looking starts again. A little. It always does. Tomorrow there will be a lens somewhere, a call, a doorway, a glance, the small daily sittings nobody schedules. Tomorrow you may even angle your chin at your own reflection and conduct the old negotiation, sitter and painter both, in the mirror over the sink. But that's tomorrow. Tomorrow is on the other side of a long darkness, and the darkness comes first, and the darkness takes no likenesses. The same as it was for the boy on Gutter Lane, when the candle went out and the ruff hung on its peg, and his face was finally his own. The same as it was for the knight's wife, home from Blackfriars, asleep in her own unfashionable nightgown with her own hands. The same as the farm bedroom over the parlour, the painted faces keeping watch downstairs, the real ones breathing slow. The same darkness, wrapping the same tired, finished, unwatched faces, all the way down the centuries to this room, this pillow, this breath. Some things pass through 400 years without changing shape at all, and this is one, and you are in it now. Centuries will pass. They will, from tonight too. That's the strangest, softest thought this channel owns, so hold it loosely like something warm. The portraits you know will change hands and walls and countries. The little ivory faces will sleep in their drawers. The lavender woman will stand in her dark gallery being magnificent at nobody. And the ways of looking will change past all recognition. The lenses will get stranger, the images faster, the purges quieter, but people will still do it, still sit up straight when it counts, still turn their best side to the light, still ache in the held moment, wanting to be seen true and seen kindly, both at once, by someone. Some things don't change. The wish under the sitting doesn't change. It was never really a wish to be painted. It was a wish to be kept. And tonight, with the easels folded and the shutters closed and every studio in history gone dark, you can put even that wish down. You are already kept. The people who need your face have it by heart. And since nothing more is owed, since the wish is down and the debt is paid, drift with me one last slow time around the year this story lived in. Because you may not have noticed, in all the aching and the guineas, that tonight quietly walked you through every season there is, and seasons are good to fall asleep on. They ask nothing. They only turn. It began in June, on that Tuesday in 1587, early summer light, the kindest light of the limner's year, standing tall and even in the north window from 6 in the morning until 8 at night. Summer was the sitting season in that trade, and you can guess why now, without being told. The light stayed long, and the sitter's fingers didn't stiffen, and the paint moved willingly in the warmth. Somewhere in every summer since, that room is still standing in its long white afternoon, patient as a sundial. Then October 1638, and the river changing its smell. Tar and cold tide, the year leaning toward its close. Autumn in the silk machine meant candles lit by 4, the drapery men working close to the flames, the sitters arriving chilled and being warmed with wine before their hour. The clock struck earlier and earlier into darkness. Even the busiest studio in England shortened with the days, because every studio in tonight's whole story, however grand, ran finally on the same fuel, daylight, and daylight kept farmers' hours no matter whom it was serving. There's a comfort in that, if you hold it a moment. The Queen's limner and the King's painter and the deaf man with his miles of walking all stopped when the sun stopped. The sun was the one master who was never argued with, never bribed, never late. March 1765, and the carriages steaming in the cold outside Leicester Fields. Late winter, the fashionable season, London packed for Parliament and pleasure, which is why the appointment book was full and the horses stamped. November 1772, wet wool and coal smoke off the Strand, a miniature painted against the failing year so it could catch the spring-fleeced Bengal. February 1836, snowlight in the parlour. The one season a farm could spare its people to sit still, the season of banked stoves and mended harness, and, once in a lifetime, a stranger with an easel. Then summer again, 1883, sea light at Paramé, the restless beauty and the exasperated painter chasing each other through the bright months, and May, 1884, under the glass roof in Paris, spring at its cruelest and most crowded, around and round, summer light, autumn candles, winter stillness, spring verdicts. The whole 400-year story fits inside one turning year, and the year is still turning tonight, wherever you are, right outside your window, asking nothing of your face whatsoever. Whatever season is standing over your roof right now, it has stood over every room in this story, and it will go on turning at exactly this speed all night, slow and huge and entirely indifferent to likenesses, and you can lean your whole weight on that. People wear out. Even portraits we learned tonight can wear out. The year doesn't wear out. And before the last lamp goes down, let me hand you back, one each, briefly, without reopening a single door, the small mercies. Because every room in tonight's story, however strict, gave its sitter one, and mercies are worth recounting at this hour in a way that ordeals are not. The mercy of the goldsmith's room was the hour's end stretch, that staggering, knee-cracking, glorious release at the top of each hour, when the body came back to itself like a tide coming in. You have it permanently now. You are, in a sense, always in that stretch. The mercy of Blackfriars was the music, the lutenist below the floorboards, playing sarabandis to strangers by the hour, so that the stillness had something to lean on. Stillness with music under it is half asleep already. If there is any sound in your room tonight, a fan, rain, traffic far off, this voice, let it be your lutenist. That's all a lullaby has ever been, something steady underneath, so the holding still stops being work. The mercy of Leicester Fields was the being handed down, the great man's own hand steadying the descent from the throne, the world returning underfoot, the knees remembering the floor. Every ordeal in that house ended with a hand held out. Most ordeals do in the end, though the chair never believes it at minute 40. The mercy of the Strand was the miniature turned over into the sitter's own palm. Judge it yourself. The one moment in 4 centuries when the person in the chair got the verdict before the world did. And the mercy of the parlour was the plainest and the largest. The painter who packed his trunk for the extra day at the kitchen door and said nothing about the fee. The trade had its mercies all along, you see. They just never made the invoices. Even Paris had one, though it took 30 years to arrive. the strap lifted. Wrong year, wrong room, no witnesses, no apology attached, but lifted carefully by the only hand that could and left secure forever. Some mercies are like that. They come far too late to save anything, and they still count. The museum label doesn't mention it. The shoulder knows. Count mercies at this hour, not aches. The aches all died with their bodies. That's the audit the centuries did for us, and it's worth saying once plainly as the very last accounting of the night. Of everything that happened in all those chairs, the cramps, the itches, the pins, the guineas, the verdicts, the laughter under the glass roof, the centuries kept almost nothing. They lost the answers, lost the fees, lost the gossip, lost every single itch. Nobody on earth remembers the ache between any of these shoulder blades. What the centuries kept, all they kept, and they kept it with both hands, was the calm. The finished faces at rest, wearing the one expression that was assembled out of all those uncomfortable hours, unhurried, unafraid, done. Walk any portrait gallery on earth tonight, in any country, and that is what hangs there in the dark by the 10,000, not the torture. The torture was biodegradable. Only the stillness was archived, and your own archive is growing the same way, whether you tend it or not. Somewhere in the great sprawl of images the world keeps now, your calm moments are being sorted from your aches by the same patient centuries at the same slow speed. The bad light will be forgotten. The unflattering angles will die their quiet deaths, unmourned, exactly as the itches did. What will be left of your face in the end, in the keeping of the people who need it, is what was left of every face tonight. The listening look, the lifted chin, the settled hands, the kept version, the meant version. It's already being chosen gently without your supervision, and it will be kind. The long sorting is almost always kind, so there is truly nothing left to hold. Feel that now in the actual body, one release at a time, the way the sitters felt it at each hour's end, but slower and for keeps. The jaw first. The jaw has been politely holding your face together all day, the way starch held the ruff. Let it come apart, teeth apart, tongue loose, the whole architecture off duty, the neck next. The neck that tonight carried a platter of starch, a powdered tower, a coin-perfect profile held against the cording of its own muscles. Yours is carrying nothing now but the small familiar weight of your own head, and the pillow has taken even that. The pillow is the posing stand at last perfected. It asks for no pose. The shoulders down, further than that. There's a place, another half-inch below wherever they've stopped, that shoulders only find in the last minutes before sleep. The below the ache place, on the far side of men at 40, where the blooming thing finally closes back up petal by petal into nothing. Go there, you've earned the far side. The arms, the elbows that weighed 40 pounds in other people's poses, the hands, the good enough hands, the always were the hands, open on the blanket, holding no rose, no fan, no glove, no phone, and the back, the long back, flat at last against the one piece of furniture in this entire story that never hurt anyone. Breathe once, slowly, all the way out, and notice. Nothing needs to be held at the bottom of the breath. No painter is waiting there. The next breath comes on its own, unposed, and the one after that, and that is the whole of your work now. A thing your body will do with no instruction at all, 10,000 times before morning, faithful as a bell nobody has to ring. Tomorrow can have the lenses back. tomorrow can have the angles and the glances and the little daily negotiations of being seen. You'll be equal to them. You always are. Tomorrow the year will have turned one more unnoticeable degree. The galleries will unlock. The lights will come up on all the finished faces, and the long sorting will go on choosing the kind versions of everyone. But every one of those things belongs to tomorrow, and tomorrow is not in this room. This room is off the calendar. This room is the one sitting that's never scheduled, in the one studio that keeps no book. One more minute of company before the lamps, though, because we have said good night in one way or another to every sitter, and we have not yet said it to the painters. They sat too, you know, in their own fashion, on the other side of the easel, hour for hour, every hour their sitters served, plus all the hours after, alone with the drying faces. The chair was hard on the body for an afternoon. The easel was hard on a body for a lifetime. So let them go to their rest as well, each with the ending the record actually gives them. This channel doesn't invent deathbeds, and tonight of all nights it doesn't need to, because the true ones are gentle enough. Nicholas Hilliard worked into old age and outlived his own fashion. The taste turned, as taste does, toward newer hands. And the man who had painted the Queen of England in a garden with no shadows knew money trouble at the end. The record even shows him briefly held for debt in 1617, in his 70th year, over another man's obligation he had stood surety for. He died in January of 1619, past 70, having written down, for anyone who would ever sit or paint again, exactly how to catch lightning off a human face with a squirrel's hair. The treatise outlived the debts. It always does, that kind of thing. The debts are dust, and the lovely graces and witty smilings are still passing, like lightning, through every face you know. Sir Anthony Van Dyck you have already seen to his rest, in old St. Paul's among the bishops, in December 1641. The machine stopped at last, aged 42, and the amber silk folded away for good. But here is a soft echo the centuries arranged, and it belongs in the last minute of tonight. When Joshua Reynolds died in February 1792, laden with every honour his age could stack on a painter, London buried him in St. Paul's as well. The new cathedral by then, risen out of the fire that took the old one, so that the two greatest portrait machines England ever ran came to rest, a century and a half apart under the same name, in the same ground, in the same city stillness. The pocketbooks closed. The macaw, history does not follow. The queue of carriages dispersed finally forever, and Leicester Fields was just a square again, with weather in it. Hans Holbein stayed in favour and died in London in 1543, still the king's painter, having survived the one royal tantrum that should have ended him. Proof for all time that painting the truth is occasionally survivable. Amy Phillips put down his brushes in 1865, William Matthew Prior in 1873, and between them they left more faces behind than most kings, scattered through the farmhouses and historical societies of a country that was too young to sit still and sat still for them anyway. And John Singer Sargent, who fled Paris over a shoulder strap and conquered the world from London, who painted presidents and duchesses until he was so weary of faces that he swore off portraits almost entirely, growling that he would rather paint fences. Sargent died in April 1925 at his house in Teat Street in Chelsea at 69. And he died. The record is plain, and on a night like this it reads like a blessing, in his sleep, in bed, at home, reportedly with his reading beside him, the light out, the face off duty. The man who had spent 50 years commanding other people to hold still slipped into the one stillness that commands nobody, as easily as a sitter slipping behind their own eyes in the third hour. Of all the ways tonight's story could choose to let its last painter go, it chose that one on its own. Sometimes history writes the lullaby for you. So the painters are down, the sitters are down, which leaves only the ones I borrowed. The gentleman with the ruff and the bead of blood, the knight's wife with her stranger's hands in amber, the lady on the rolling throne with the one deep hairpin, the girl whose mouth was exactly decided enough, half a year ahead of herself on the sea, the farm wife who felt stillness as theft and hung it on the parlour wall anyway. You know by now what they were. I told you at the start, and I'll keep the promise at the end. They were borrowed eyes, stitched from the thousands who really did climb those stairs and hold those poses and pay those fees and go home changed. So I cannot tell you how their stories ended, and I will not pretend to. Whoever they severally were, all the forgotten hundreds each of them stood for. History closed over them quietly, the way water closes, and kept, in most cases, not even a name. Only this. Somewhere, for some of them, a small painted rectangle survived. In a drawer, on a wall, behind museum glass with a label that says, in the saddest and most honest two words in any collection, Sitter Unknown. Portrait of an unknown lady. Portrait of a young man. The face kept. The name lost. The ache, as always, as ever, biodegraded to nothing. If you ever stand in front of one of those unknowns, you'll know 'em now. You were them all night. Nod and let them be. There. The whole company is at rest. Painters, sitters, borrowed eyes and all. 4 centuries of held breath, exhaled. The galleries of the world are dark and full and perfectly quiet. 10,000 finished faces hanging calmly over empty floors on every continent, needing nothing, wanting nothing, proving all night long the one thing tonight has been proving from the first ache, that everything difficult about a face eventually falls away, and what remains is still and kept and at peace. The room you're lying in is the newest room in that long museum, and its one exhibit is off display until morning. 6 lamps left then. Count them down with me. 1 breath each, out slowly on each one, and don't work at it. The counting does itself. 6. The lamp over Gutter Lane, the clean chapel light, the brushes fine as whiskers. It dims, and the ace of hearts sleeps face down in its drawer. Out. 5. The lamp at Blackfriars, where the clock has nobody to strike for, and the river says it's one long thing. The tide breathes up the landing steps and back, up and back, the slowest breathing in England. Match it once. Out. 4. The lamp in the octagon, high in its 9-foot window. The throne stands empty at its 18 inches, retired, and the last snuff dust settles on the colour table like the gentlest snow indoors. Out. 3. The lamp off the Strand, over the ivory ovals and their sea-born hopes. Every ship is in. Every comparison is long over, and every one of them at this distance came out kindly. Out. 2. The parlour lamp on the hill farm, banked stove, blue snow, 2 painted watchers keeping their easy watch over nobody's chores. The bells on the hill road are a county away by now, and fainter and fainter. Out. 1. The last lamp, the Paris lamp, over the glass roof and the black satin and the strap that stays up forever. The crowd is gone 140 years. The gallery holds its breath without any effort at all, the way paintings do, the way you're learning to. Out! And the dark that's left is not an empty dark. It's a kept dark, a museum dark, warm with finished things, and you are lying in the middle of it, the one unfinished thing which is exactly what a sleeper should be, unfinished, off the easel, nothing but underpainting and possibility with the good light coming tomorrow. You're still enough now, warm enough, kept enough. You have a bed and a breath and a face nobody is grading. And that's more than the chair ever gave anyone in any century at any price. That's enough. It was always going to be enough. Tomorrow there'll be mirrors, and you'll make your small treaty with them, the way everyone has since the first polished bronze. Tomorrow there will be lenses, and you'll give them the half-second they ask, and they'll be satisfied. Because half a second is all any likeness cost now, thanks to everything you watched tonight. Tomorrow, somewhere, a person will stand in front of a portrait in a museum and wonder, idly, what it felt like to sit for it. And you, of all the people on earth, will actually know. But that's tomorrow. Tomorrow is far away, on the other side of the longest, darkest, kindest gallery there is, and you are only at the beginning of it, just past the last lamp with hours and hours of soft nothing hung on the walls ahead. No more counting, no more rooms, no more holding anything for anyone. So let it come now. Let sleep take you the way the dust takes a gallery, one lamp at a time, no hurry, nothing lost, every face still there in the dark, safe on its wall, needing nothing. Let the rooms fade. The chapel of dust, the silk machine, the octagon, the parlour, let them go out one by one behind you, mercies and all. Let the ache go, yours, theirs, the whole 400-year ache, released at last from between every pair of shoulder blades that ever held a pose. It was faithful, but it was never yours to keep. Let the face empty. The master is away. The house can stand open tonight. Let your thoughts slow and soften and lose their outlines, the way a likeness loses its edges in the last light. No more corrections now. No more sittings. The picture finished, the picture good. You've earned this rest. You've been holden still all night, and no one asked you to. And that makes it the opposite of torture. It makes it peace. Take it. And dream, if you dream, of a small, clean room full of northern light, where someone patient and kind is making sure that you will not be forgotten, and you don't even have to sit up straight. Good night.